Welcome to a beautiful winter afternoon, and I am inside the 2025 BMW M2. This is the smallest M car you can buy, full fat M, and it's also been updated for 2025. So let's go to the phone and get to some notes. Firstly, compared to the previous generation M2, this one is bigger and heavier. It has a 2-inch longer wheelbase. It is 4 inches longer overall, 1.3 inches wider, and about 280 pounds heavier. That's right, this thing weighs damn near as much as a BMW M4 now, and its total weight is now coming in at around 3,800 pounds. That's a lot for a small car. Now, the good news is that for 2025, we have some changes. Under the hood, that 3-liter straight 6 used to make around 450 horsepower. Now it makes 476, about a 20 horsepower bump. BMW didn't explain how they got that increase. I'm just left to wonder. And interestingly, there's different torque ratings for the manual and the automatic versions. This is thankfully a stick shift manual, but that means we are going to have to make do with a mere 406 pound-feet of torque versus the automatic, which gets 443. Because of the shifting and the extra torque, the automatic is like 0.2 faster to 100 kilometers an hour, 4.1 for the auto, 4.3 for the stick as we have it. I don't think it's a big deal. Pricing, I'm gonna read pricing notes. So the BMW M2 in Canada starts at a pretty reasonable $78,000. However, as you see this one, it is $91,000 and change. The biggest reasons is that we have a couple expensive options on this car. First, we have the $3,800 BMW M Premium Pack, and that gives you the Harman Kardon Premium Sound. It gives you laser headlights, a heads-up display, and wireless charging, which is located here in the center console. Now, these are all pretty handy things, but I expect wireless charging on a $78,000 car, regardless of how much power it makes. The other expensive options is that up top, we have a $2,900 carbon fiber roof, and the biggest option on this car is actually the paint. That twilight purple pearl metallic paint is beautiful. I love the color, and it will set you back 5 Gs. This is a $5,000 paint option. In fact, the McLaren 750 I drove, which also had optional paint, that had a less expensive paint option than this. That is just bananas. $5 grand if you want the purple. Other updates for 2025 is that you get this D-shaped steering wheel, and the spokes have these little holes in them. It's a different spoke design. We'll get more into the wheel later, but this is a new wheel, and the center stripe is also new for 2025. But enough from the notes, let's get into driving it. Now, putting my phone away in the wireless charger, I actually think that's a little ingenious solution. It's got a little clip, holds it in while I'm driving, and I like that. I think that's quite nice. So, before we set off, you kind of have to choose your drive modes. There's a lot of things you can configure here. We have engine, which can be efficient, sport, or sport plus, chassis, comfort, sport, or sport plus, steering, and brake, and traction control, all configurable. You can hotspot these different presets and set just how you want on these M buttons, M1 and M2, and that will basically save your presets. So when you get in the car, press that button, and it will set it up how you like it. But just for fun, we're gonna go through it. I like the engine in sport, a little more responsive. Gear shift assistant means that if I go from 3rd to 2nd, it'll automatically blip the throttle. I'm gonna turn that off just because I like to. I leave the chassis in comfort. That's how I like to drive this car, especially on these crappy roads. Steering, I put it in sport, but it doesn't seem to do much. And we'll go with comfort brakes because it's a little icy out. We could use the extra padding, I think, on the pedal. We can also configure our loud mode on, loud mode off, loud mode on, loud mode off. It doesn't seem to make a huge difference. So, electric parking brake off, into first gear, and let's see how much of 470 horsepower we can use on these crappy roads. Ready for it to be not much? Here we go. Traction control. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. This is a legit low 12-second car in the quarter mile, and it is effing fast. This is a fast car because it really makes power everywhere. It's a twin turbo, 3-liter straight 6, but the big news is that it makes peak torque down at like 1900 all the way to 5900, and then peak power it comes in at 6250. So you get this big fat power curve the whole way through. So there's not like you know, in a naturally aspirated car where you're waiting on revs to build power. That said, there's still worth to rev it out. It's still worthwhile, but it doesn't, you know, you're not waiting on anything. It has it drives like a big block. Honestly, you got this big fat mid-range. It's lively on these roads, I'll tell you that much. Now the engine sound is loud in the car, but not that loud outside of it, and I would suspect that a fair amount of the sound I'm hearing is coming from the speakers and not the engine. But it's good to have a straight 6, not a turbo 4 in a car. Love that. I like the shorter wheelbase, rear drive. It's really enjoyable to drive in a sporty environment. And look at these gears, just going right through them. They are so closely spaced. I'm actually going for the sport brake pedal. That is a thing I always complain about in sporty cars, is that the gearing is too long. Porsche is honestly the worst offender for this. When the gears are too long, you're going too fast and you're not shifting enough to enjoy them. In this BMW, the gears are closely spaced. I'm doing plenty of shifting and I'm enjoying it, which is why you would buy a manual transmission car, because you enjoy it. The manual, by the way, in the M2 is a no-cost option. You can get it either way, there's no price difference. But like, listen to this. Second, third. I love that these are close ratios. In fact, even when you get on the highway, here's 6th gear. That's 6th gear at 85 kilometers an hour, and it's damn near 2,000 RPM. Like, it's actually geared pretty low, which I like. There's probably a fuel economy penalty, but it means that on the highway, this thing always has pickup. It's always ready to party, this car. Because this is a manual, we get to talk about the clutch and shifter. I kind of like it. There's a long throw back and forth for the shifter, which maybe some people won't like, but I think it makes it feel more involving. The clutch pedal has also an exceptionally long travel. I feel like every time I shift this car, my leg goes like a long way. But it's the physical nature of that makes it really engaging. I can't remember the last time I drove a modern stick shift that wasn't just like a flick of the wrist when it came to the stick. I like that this is actually an elbow motion, not a wrist motion to shift. And long, slightly rubbery shift patterns are kind of a BMW trademark. That is what they do. Now, coming into a turn, the big thing is I'm actually not in love with how this car corners. That's for 2 reasons. A, this has electric power steering that is, even in the sports setting, so numb. So numb. It is really, actually, in a performance standpoint, on the road at least, hard to figure out what the front end is doing because I feel so little through the wheel. And I have to say, I've actually driven some pretty nice driver sims, Assetto Corsa, Gran Turismo, and on a good rig, those have better driving feel. So in certain conditions, yes, there are actual video games that I think have better steering feel than this BMW, because they're just, I can't feel what the wheels are doing. It's precise. You look at that, there's no play, but I can't figure out what's happening behind the wheels. And the other problem is that the steering wheel is enormous. It is huge. It's so chonky. BMW basically invented these big, fat sports steering wheels, and this one is a biggin. And it also has these enormous button pads right at about 9 and 3, where I want to put my hands on the wheel, but they're blocked. There's this big block of plastic, kind of where I want to be driving the car. There's just a lot going on this wheel. There's no paddle shifters, but there's these 2 M buttons. There's a host of buttons on each side where your thumbs would be. There's just a lot happening. And I kind of like, you know, when people take the buttons off the steering wheels, and I get that this is a daily driver car. It's meant to be used every day, but I just wish that there was a bit more clarity on the wheel. Maybe that would make me feel a little more positive about the things I'm feeling through it, because both how it feels in my hand physically and how it responds, not my favorite things about this car. Now the good news about being rear drive is that you can do very easy U-turns, I would say. ESC off, And just like that. I mean, the balance of the car cannot be faulted. Honestly, it turns and drifts just beautifully. Turn that traction control back on. You know, there's things you can and can't complain about with this car. It turns and handles beautifully, but I would say at all times, you are feeling the weight. You can never really escape the weight of this car, and in some ways, it drives more like an old Mustang than an M car. It's got this big, broad, fat power curve, big, powerful engine. It's a rocket in a straight line on dry pavement. But then it has this weight, and you can feel that in the braking, in the cornering, how it handles bumps. There's just a lot of mass here, even considering that this is a small car. Like, this car does not have what I would call usable rear seats. I personally cannot fit in the back seat because I'm too tall. And I'm like 5'9". I'm not that tall, but I'm too tall for these seats. Considering this is essentially a 2-seat coupe, 3,800 pounds is a lot. Now, a lot of that weight are luxury items inside this wonderful interior, which we should talk about. Now, one interesting thing is that this car has optional $250 brushed aluminum trim, which is actual metal. And that is a really premium touch for $250. I think if you were gonna buy one of these cars, you owe it to yourself to get the brushed aluminum. It's not that expensive, and it really dresses up the look more than the faux carbon fiber and all the other textures we're used to seeing in a car. I like it. It's also worth knowing that these seats, which are heated, thankfully, are quite comfortable. They offer like a hardcore carbon bucket, but these are the standard seats. All right, straight stretch of road, somewhat clear. Let's see if we can put any of that 470 horsepower to use. So here's first gear, gonna roll into it. It's fast. It's really, really fast. Like, this thing is a rocket in a straight line. And so if you want the thrills of big power, big acceleration, and a stick shift, this is a great package, especially now that the Challengers have gone away. You know, those are kind of gone. If you want thrills and a stick shift that isn't Porsche expensive, what a great option. I also think if you bought this in a stick shift, you're gonna get all your money back if you went to sell this in 5 years. I'm just saying, I think that the stick shift versions are a bit of a collector's item. Back to the interior. There's a lot of cool things that are pushing it in terms of the gimmick scale. Like these little M flags and the doors light up at night. This center stack kind of lights up at night. Even there's M2 badges in the headrests, which also light up. And all this is very cool. All this, I'm sure, adds weight. Also, your view up front is dominated by this massive screen. In fact, it's so big, it has a little brace on that corner to support it from the dashboard because it's like a billboard almost. And within the screen are all the gauges that I need to drive the car. And considering it's this digital screen, and they can put the tach and the speedometer wherever they want, they have put them in really silly places. So basically, the speedometer is like this on one side, and the tachometer is like this on the other side, but that's kind of hidden by the wheel. So the top of the tachometer, which I need to know when to shift, is hidden by the wheel because they put it over in the corner. And in the middle, I have this kind of multi-configurable thing which you can use to show your music, the boost, tire pressures, all kinds of stuff. That's front and center. I have a clear view of the secondary information, but I have an obstructed view of the primary information. That is just backwards. To be fair, you can hit this M mode button and put it into sport or track, which will change how the display looks, but even that isn't great. It's just, there is clearly a design, like they designed it to look a certain way first, and they designed that with function second. That is kind of annoying, because even in track mode, that's what I want to see what the engine is doing, and it's a manual. I want to be in charge of what's happening, and I need to know what's happening to do that. And then the screen on the right is more your typical infotainment screen. This car has Apple CarPlay. It is correctly formatted. It fills the entire screen when you use it. I like that. And it has, you know, the native BMW system isn't that bad. But really, I just like the CarPlay integration is good. And there's a lot of vehicle performance settings you can change and configure within that screen, so you'll actually be using it quite a lot. Kind of weird and annoying stuff, like there's no hard buttons for climate. I have to hit the temperature button to adjust my heated seat, my heated wheel. climate control, so if you don't like going through menus, it does that. As far as a daily use car, you only have 2 real seats, but on the plus side, you have a lot of cargo space, and the ride comfort is, I would say, not bad for a performance car. It's definitely stiff. You definitely know that this is a performance car riding on big wheels with big brakes underneath those, but it's doable. And it's certainly worth it when you get to drive something like this in all conditions. This is an all-weather car. Put winter tires on it. Absolutely drive it year-round. So, that's my take on the BMW M2. It's a really good sport coupe, and honestly, I feel bad even critiquing it too much because it just exists in 2025, and semi-affordable manual transmission, rear-wheel drive sporty cars are getting fewer every single year. Every single year, it seems like we have just a few fewer options for them to choose from. So I feel a bit bad picking out all the stuff about this one that could be better, but it's true. Especially when you consider that the straight six, pretty unique drivetrain, and it makes a good noise. Overall, I'm pretty positive on this car. I really like it, but certainly some of the design decisions, I mean, that's the other thing I haven't talked about, is that the exterior design of this car is quite polarizing. It's pretty aggressive. It's not what I would call classically beautiful, and I think a lot of people are actually turned off by that, but I don't like talking about exterior design too much because it's a very individual thing. But there's a lot of just design choices in this car that don't have to be so weird, like the tachometer, the speedometer, the exterior styling. They made some choices with this car which I maybe would not have done the same. But it's a killer powertrain, and it's an all-weather car, and it comes in purple. So while it may have some flaws, it may not be perfect, it's still a car that I like, and definitely if you're considering a rear-wheel drive sporty car, this is one of the top ones that I would recommend. For more news and reviews, don't forget to check out Driving.ca, where you will find my full written review of this car, and thank you for watching. And let us know in the comments what we should drive and review next. Now, I'm going to get back to driving. There goes Elle reviewing the Hakone 86. Check out that review on Driving.ca as well, where she is reviewing the Toyota GR86 Hakone edition, which is about 1,000 pounds lighter than this car. So, does subtracting weight and power make that a better sports car? Tune into her review to find out.